Cool. Bruce, 5 years on.
Yeah, pre-COVID, we had that chat, like
Yeah.
in some ways it's a lot's happened.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot's happened. And I mean, we had that chat 5 years ago. I remember then we ran an event in Egypt together and we both had super strong downloads in the desert. This was just, I mean, I think maybe that was 2018. For me, I had this thing of some deep voice that was like, get ready. What's coming is the forces of the planet are in the process of waking up, and it's going to rattle and shake human civilization in ways that you cannot anticipate yet. And then, of course, 2019, late 2019, 2020, we get COVID, and we basically are invited into a decade of global initiation. So that's continued, and yeah, so we're in the process.
Yeah, and we had that chat at Highden, which then got also caught up in COVID. We've had
Mm.
12 temple trainings there now. The field is landed, but 2020 felt like it all of a sudden was going global. Everything that these temples were here to serve in the future is now happening en masse.
Mm.
And so we're coming up to 2025, the midpoint of that decade. It feels good to like revisit with a little bit of rear view mirror, a little bit of, forward sight, like what's happened, what's been surprising, where are we
Yeah,
going.
yeah. Well, I remember with 2020 at the beginning, you put out this video, didn't you, where you went a bit through the astrology of it.
Yeah.
And I think I was one of a bunch of people who later, when everything started rumbling really, really strongly, I revisited that and was like, this was bang on. So I wondered how that was for you, because it felt like that. I felt like you were in a process of revelation in with the astrology of 2020. Okay, wait, this is big. What's going to
Yeah.
start to move now? How was that for you?
Well, certainly the astrology pointed that things were revealing, but I also feel like the very thing that's happening, which is hopefully we're going to get and talk about the singularity, that you're
Yeah.
working with, is that the very thing that's happening is the one being that we are is waking up and remembering itself inside each of us. And
Mm.
so it's not like we have to be, Nostradamus. It's like we can feel it in the core of our being,
Mm.
and we're in denial of it.
Mm.
We're in denial still of humanity, of the fact that the sixth great mass extinction is happening all around us, and we're worried about gender pronouns, or that the world is laboring under the tension of the birth of something amazing, and we can't cope with that. It's like it's overwhelming for our individual self, so we rush to a little fractal that we can cope with, and we work the energy there.
Mm.
But I think all prognostication is really just a knowing what we know at a deeper level and telling the truth about that, whatever the consequences of that are. And I think that's what the global initiation is
Mm.
the gradual, undeniable emergence of a
Mm.
truth that spans decades, like that spans millions of years, that the whole of evolution on Earth has come for. And gradually letting ourselves open our minds and our hearts and our bodies to this emergent truth.
Yeah. And I feel like there's pressure that's building. People can feel the pressure that's building inwardly as well, right? I feel like I've had some powerful conversations with people about that, where I mean, there's an outer pressure that's building that works through all the circumstances of COVID and masks and, vaccination, yes or no, and all of and then the war and the global ripple effects of that economically, the recognition. I think we've had obviously the hottest year on record this year since anything was being recorded. So ecological stuff is really active. And so there's the outer stuff, but then there's an inner pressure, I feel, that's being activated, that is what you're talking about. It's the one life that we all are in our core that is putting pressure on the interior of human beings for its remembrance, and the pressure of that is the initiatory process as well. And with Singularity, that's the core of this, and I feel like that's the core of the paradigm that we're entering into, which is that life first. The paradigm which Singularity is taking a stand in, which I sometimes I talk about as, yes, it might feel spiritually transcendental, but it's actually radically sane, right? It's radically sane when we start to talk about, let's put the one first. Let's put the one that actually deep in our body and deep in our heart and deep in our soul, we know that this is the truth of what's here. And actually the degradation of the environment and things falling apart, like every single minutiae of lessons that we're learning about the fallacy and of putting a paradigm of separation first is
Well,
it's back to that.
I feel sorry for like those people who like have wealth and power and influence and are busy like buying a little bit of property in southern New Zealand or somewhere else to ride out the storm, and protect their wealth and their health. And not only isn't that going to work because the climate change is global and phenomena and there's nowhere to run to, but they can't run from the inside of themselves. COVID taught us that, is what you're saying. There's an inner pressure. So it's not just the external pressure to transform, it's coming from the inside, in mental health, in suicide ideology, in relationship dramas, in like there's an unstoppable emergence that even if you control the outer environment, you can't control the inner. It's like the Alien movie, like, oh my God, it's inside me, I can't escape.
Yeah.
So maybe why don't you share a little bit about Singularity, this amazing thing that you initiated that feels like so obvious to me that it's like hasn't been done before. But so you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Singularity is definitely the most audacious and grandiose thing that I've attempted to do in my spiritual kind of purpose journey so far. And it's been Inception for me, like the movie Inception, where there's seeds of invitation and instruction which are planted in dreams for human beings. And so I woke up, I think it was 5 years ago, it was 2017, from a dream where I'd been told in a dream, you need to start a transnational political party. And I woke up the next morning and I thought, okay, that clearly feels like that's clear guidance, and I have no idea what that means. So and that seed germinated very, very slowly over the next years. But actually, when COVID happened and 2020 came round, and the whole global process started to rumble in new ways, there was a waterfall of, oh, actually, more and more I have a sense of what this wants to be. So Singularity is a transnational political party that is sourced in the one life that beats in the core and the heart of the earth through all human beings, through all kingdoms of nature. And it's about the transformation of our relationship to power and politics and leadership, so that we put that one life that lives through the earth and all humanity and all kingdoms first. And we start with that as the foundation. And then we see where we go from there. And it's been it's a beautiful journey that I'm in with it, where I can feel people have a almost forbidden response to this. There's like a forbidden longing that gets activated because it touches what we know must come. It touches the place of what we know must come, which is a power which is recognized as sacred power, that is one power, that is anchored in one life that we all share in, that vibrates through everything, that is a sacred vocation in each of us to step into and participate in. And we know deep in our bodies and in our hearts, this should be the way that politics, which is really about how human beings channel power, this should be how this works. And it's a forbidden longing because we can't hold that, most of us, as we're surrounded by the polarization and the tribalism and the Machiavellianism and, you know, just all the, someone said to me once, you know, like the way things work in politics, if that was how a personal relationship that you shared with someone worked, you would never talk to those people ever again. But actually this is, it's normalized in politics. So there's a, you know, something that I have experienced in running Singularity events is that it is explosive to open up just a little bit the pain and the trauma and the sensed betrayal and the rage and the grief that lives in human beings around how our systems of power work. Because actually we know, all of us in our bodies, and we push it down deep, that we are surrounded by profound misuses and abuses of power constantly. And we're participating in them in various ways. But this is about the reset of that and the radical reset at the root of power. Because as our work and what you brought through has really been standing for, if we are, you know, we know there needs to be radical resets of how our economic system works, how our political system works for a civilization where human beings and the earth truly thrive, then we have to go to the radical route. And Singularity is about a political movement that does that.
Beautiful. Like, I'm reminded of Rumi's quote, you know, start a foolish project like Noah, you know. And I think I sometimes think you're in the Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark territory. You're building an ark, but, you know, in the electrical sense, because we know the only vehicle that can carry us through to a new civilization is something that contains all of us.
Yeah.
Like, and not contain all of us as individuals, but that is the origin of all of us as individuals. And I think that's the critical move that you're making, which means that it's not going to be just adopted willy-nilly by everybody who is still in their personal. To adopt it, you have to tell the truth in your own being that you are the universal energy that's then wrapped up in the personal. You're not the personal first, because the personal first creates all of the problems with politics that we know are insurmountable. But the universal first, the recognition of the one life at the core of everything, in order to claim that and vote for it, you're making a radical choice in your own being. You're saying, I am a universal being first. And the relief that comes with that, as well as the terror and everything else, because like the terror, you know, that I face a lot in the educational world is people then saying, well, how do I integrate this into my personal world? As if, but what they're really saying is like, how do I make sense of the universal with my personal as the dominant center? And basically the answer is you can't. Like, you're never going to integrate this into your personal, because it's the personal that has to be integrated into the universal. And so that is like the hanged man. It turns the whole world upside down. So even voting for this party, people are going to have to confront, who am I? Not just who are you and what do you stand for, but who am I? And it's such a relief, I think, when you do claim that who you are is part of the universal, because it links you back to the source of true power, which is where we started in Egypt.
And you know, I remember you making this video when I launched Singularity, where you started by saying, what about if the entire paradigm that our civilization globally works on, which is that first of all, we are individuals who are trying to make sense and, you know, have a decent quality of life in a separate world. What about if that's actually wrong? You know, what about if the fundamental foundation of that worldview is wrong? You know, and I mean, it's been part of our evolutionary journey, but what about if we start with the upside down and inside out reality, which is, no, what about if each of us is that one divine life which vibrates through the core of everything, that then is clothed in a unique soul journey that has a personal sheath with all of our various kind of awkwardness and, you know, messiness and unique brands of narcissism and drama and neuroticism, you know, like, yeah, and gifts and beauty and strengths and so on. Like, what happens if we start from there? And you get a radically different paradigm, and you get power. You get power. And I've really been spending time with, there's a mantra that is in our work at a certain point where it says, you know, the mantra of the age that we're entering into is the life in your core, which is the same life in every core, matters. Life in your core, which is the same life in every core, matters. And I feel like there's a profound sacred permission slip that comes with this, which is, hey, you know, because as spiritually transcendent as any of this is, everyone knows that there is a wild life that lives in their heart. And that actually, if they were to give over their life to that, there would be an extraordinary adventure that feels profoundly risky, and who knows where that would go, you know, but everyone knows it's there.
And they all are waiting for someone to blow the horn, right?
Yeah.
You know, like, because it's too risky to do
Yeah.
on your own.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about what I call the material bypass, because I love that image you're saying of like the life that's at your core, that's at the core of all life matters.
Yeah.
And you've probably been accused, as I have, of spiritual bypass, which is, you know, that you're not integrated enough from the big picture down into, you know, the detail. But the material bypass works like this, is that we all know what you're saying. We all can feel it in our hearts. And we all know philosophically, like we listen to Alan Watts talk about, look, you are the Big Bang in process, you know, like evolving. We're coming towards me. You are not an individual. You are the whole process. Yes, we all know this philosophically, but when it comes down to our money and the choices that could affect the survival of our body, we material bypass. We throw out the spiritual truth that's at the very core of our being that we know to be true, and we replace it with self-preservation, with self-interest, because we don't know that spirit that lives at the core of us matters. So we default to our mind controlling our reality, controlling everybody else's reality to protect us from death, because we don't know that spirit is our life and death. And if we lose that, we create the very environment that forces spirit now to break us onto our knees and confess that all the way along we are that one life. And we need to base not just our spiritual philosophies on that truth, we need to base our economics and our political process and what matters in our homes and our families on that truth. And that's what you're doing. You're restoring to the center of human activity, a fundamental principle.
Yeah.
And so it seems radical, but it's actually just the only way.
Yeah. And it's about plugging back into what is truly life-giving, because, you know, the civilization that we are part of and surrounded by is one that has disconnected itself from what is truly life-giving, and we're working ourselves out in that space afterwards, you know, and that's why we are so, you know, we have this connection from death that we have, you know, we're managing living in a world of our own created separation. And I get that this can feel like a big kind of, well, that's a fundamental transformation that I'm not quite sure how practical that is, John, you know, to rework and upside down and inside out this whole thing. But just try it, you know, and it just starts with coming home to that life which exists in the core of every heart, in your heart, in my heart, and that people, society has told us is basically maybe only worth listening to in the context of your intimate relationships, where, you know, like maybe that's, you know, the life and truth of your heart is worth listening to. But you and I know, I mean, basically our bond is the adventure of what happens if you really give yourself to that. What is the journey and the adventure that life is going to take you on there? Because you make yourself available to life. And actually, my experience is that I've been in all sorts of different environments of self-development and spirituality and so on, where people are exploring all sorts of different things. But my experience is that everyone actually just wants the same thing. And the same thing is everyone deeply wants life, and they want to be lived by something deeper than themselves. And they want to be in connection with life. They want to feel life. They want to share life. They want to be in the company of life. And but of course, and it takes us back to this point around the pressure that we began with, to make ourselves available for that is a profound and yet deeply simple surrender. It's the T.S. Eliot quote, you know, it's you know, it costs nothing less than everything, a condition of complete simplicity that costs nothing less than everything. And for me, that's the foundation of true power. And that's a radically different reframe as well, that, you know, power is not just something which people are given permission to hold when they step into positions of formal authority or political representation. Power is a frequency of source that exists in the core of every being. And the source of that, the entry into that power, is surrender. And it's not, I don't mean a surrender that's a kind of, oh, well, what will be, but actually it's a coming home to that life and the felt sense of that life in the core of our heart, and making ourselves available to that first, and creating cultures of that which plug us back into that which is truly life-giving, and radically reframe our relationship to freedom. You know, because that's a whole piece.
And you know, this energy both inspires people, but it also scares them. And I want to talk about why it scares them. One of the reasons it scares them is because when you and I like riff on this, we're given to this because it thrills us.
Yeah. And I don't know about you as well, but I'm terrible at living differently.
Yeah,
My
totally.
life falls apart if I try and do the other things. So, yeah.
But also we can make the mistake, which is very human, of expecting the things that drive us drive other people. And I feel like the thing with life is everybody gets to choose how much life. Like T.S. Eliot says, yes, a condition of complete simplicity costing not less than everything. Rumi says, one kiss and you're ruined forever. You know, like, so even for some people, it's just a kiss. Like they just want to kiss that life. Some people want to give themselves totally to it because that's their thing. But whether it's a kiss or whether you give yourself totally, it will ruin you. It'll ruin you for anything less, and it will ruin the structures of your identity. In other words, the very foundations of who you think you are. So flirting with it, like I said before, the act of voting for a political party like this, a transnational political party, is a subversive act to your own security as a personal self in the world. In other words, you are basically saying, by putting this first, then I'm internalizing it. And one of the great reasons why governance and politics has probably fallen, of all human activities, it's probably the one that has the least respect from the masses, when it should have the most. You know, it should be central, but it has the least respect because people know that the will to put the universal first is not there. Not even, you know, someone like JFK, don't ask what your country does for you, but what you can do for your country. That's the beginning of turning things upside down. It captures the inspiration of people, but it also triggers well, hold on. isn't me first? Aren't I the center of my world? Don't we all expand out from our own centers like concentric, rings in a lake? Isn't that the truth? Don't I have to put me and my family first? Well, maybe in practice, the way you apply the fundamental principles are in your personal life and your family life, but those fundamental principles should be universal.
Mhm.
And they should be present in the core of everyone. And they're what we want our leaders to
Mhm.
hold true for, even when we can't.
Mhm.
And so we have leadership that panders to the personal self-interest of everybody
Mhm.
instead of leadership that calls us
Yeah.
to something greater in us that we're not quite able to meet yet. And
Yeah.
it should be everyone should be allowed to choose how much life they want to run through their system.
Yeah.
But having life at the center should be non-negotiable. And it's not that way in our political system.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, for me, where I come to more and more with this is my life has been dedicated to what happens if we, so much in the realm of spiritual growth and exploration and practice. We open to depths of life which are true. We know we're opening to what is really true, and then we go back to our regular life, and we participate in the stuff which actually parts of us know this isn't really what's true. And my work and my life, and I know yours the same, is no, I want to affirm what's true, and I want to affirm it in such a way that we start there. We actually plant that as the seed of the way that we do things, because I trust that. I trust that if we do that, we're going to end up in a better place, and what you're saying around everyone gets to choose how much of this life, I'm fully in agreement. And I trust this life to put us each in our place. And I trust that that's going to look really different for different people. And I feel like I want and I'm excited by and energized by the vision of human community that comes when together we're opening to the life that we know is actually the core of what we all share and participate in. And we're trusting that that's going to put us each in our right place. And we're trusting also and having revealed between us that actually all of us are brought into something greater. We're brought into a movement and a living and a revealing and a purpose and a loving between us that happens in human community that's of an entirely different scale when we're opening to life moving through us and how it wants to do that uniquely and igniting souls into their medicine and their gift in different ways and places. Yeah, I mean, I think there's such a longing in every human being actually for genuinely life-giving human community where each of us is plugged back into the source of true power that can that can put each of us in our right place, and our journey, the vulnerable and beautiful journey of being part of that, is supported and welcomed and celebrated together, and that we and that's where we find our leaders. And whilst also leadership is a state of being that we're all sharing in a certain way too.
And I think that's as an educator, that's the difficult stage we're at globally, because even though we know the life to be at the center, the structures of civilization and society around us don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I often feel when people come and do deep work in temple culture or level 2 or whatever, it's like the major complaint is, you've ruined me for my life. Like, how has this actually helped me in my career and in my in the world that I am, in the so-called real world of the values? I'm now less able to cope than I was before in some ways, because some part of me is alive and won't accept the things that it accepted before. So you're somehow responsible for the fact that my life is not working as well as before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the society around is totally unsupportive of that life. So in a way, it's for pioneers at the moment. You
Mm.
know, and my heart and compassion goes out for those beings. And I have known so many in my life that have paid the price of holding to life at the cost of being able to fit in and function well in society as it is. But I can't remember who said it. It says like adapting well
Yeah.
to a toxic,
Yeah.
system is not necessarily a sign of mental health.
Yeah.
So we're in a place where there is like almost warnings on the label of we're in societal transition. If you can sustain a flip in your own being that places life at the center, your life will flower.
Yeah.
But there is a period of transition, and
Mm.
that transition needs transition cultures of other beings who are in transition, who care about each other, and they
Yeah.
care about their personal lives of each other as well, not just the metaphysics. They actually care about how to make those transitions lovingly with the people around you, how to understand what's going on and the effects of that change. And so that's where the deep compassion comes in about just how radical this kind of transformation is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that quote was really present for me as well. I think it was Krishnamurti or someone else, and there's no measure of what is it? It's no measure of mental health or something to be well adjusted in a profoundly sick society or something like this. And I feel like I want to speak to that. I want to speak to the place, the vulnerable place in so many human beings that's crumbling,
Yeah.
that's crumbling in with the way things are, and the the insane levels of mental health issues that are just commonplace in our society. It's like there's a crumbling psychologically in the inner as well as in the outer, where human beings are suffering deeply and breaking and trying to make it work. And even if doing the whole functional thing is working right now, we know that where this is going, what we're in, is that we're going to be brought to our knees. And the humbling, the pain, the grief, the fear of that, and the beauty of it is that whilst it's happening, you and I have seen, and so many people will have seen, there's been a flowering of soul culture
Mm-hmm.
that's been moving through the world. And I was seeing some stuff yesterday just around, recognizing how normal that's actually becoming in so many ways, and what a field of invitation and welcome that soul culture around the world is increasingly rising to say, okay, and when it crumbles and when it falls apart and when you have no idea what to do, come here.
Yeah.
and and find your way in. And what Singularity is about is, yes, and let's plug that in to the life at the core of what all of this is, of our whole planetary journey, of the core of your heart, the core of your soul, the core of your body, because we understand that that's really the source of true, real sacred power. And then let's start to rebuild our approaches to how we channel and how we share and how we embody power on the planet, which is, politics by other names. Yeah. So
I'd love to get into maybe some of the practicalities of
yeah.
Singularity. I just want to like comment about what you're saying before about the places of refuge.
Mm,
I've just been in southern Turkey, going to Göbekli Tepe, and on the way went through the area of the earthquake,
mm,
um, and to feel simultaneously the shock of one event and all the aftershocks,
mm,
buildings like 10-story, 20-story buildings just in rubble, the foundations, the way that they were built, meant that just thousands and thousands of buildings came down and are just sitting still, many of them in rubble. And everywhere there are tent cities of
Yeah.
people that survived, going on with their lives, finding love with each other, but still in the lasting and ongoing effects while the rest of the world's busy doing what it's doing. That quality of when life moves,
Mm,
like an earthquake, like forces that are greater than
mm,
humans' capacity to control. When that life moves, then things that do not have strong foundations crumble.
mm,
And we're at a time of crumbling. We're
mm,
at a time where civilization, not just the land and buildings and so on, but the very structures of thought and beliefs and ideology that our civilization is based on, these are these buildings crumbling.
mm,
And one of the great fears that people have around the singularity of AI
mm,
is that it could drive humans insane.
mm,
That if we don't have meaning, if the meaning that we had falls apart in front of us and crumbles in front of us, what's left?
mm,
And that's the shift from consciousness to life. Life
mm,
is left, the
mm,
life between us.
mm,
And from that life we will build a new world.
mm,
So yeah, just as in 2020 before COVID, recognizing that something's coming,
mm,
that the middle of this decade feels like it's a time for earthquakes. And I don't necessarily mean that the earth is going to shake beneath our feet, but I mean the earth that we trust, that we currently see as fundamental to human society, is going to have shutters and cracks and fissures put through us. That's going to make everybody feel into like, well, who am I and what matters when what I relied on
mm.
is falling around me.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. And I feel like politically what we see in the world with greater and greater polarization, more and more autocratic leaders, we are seeing, in my view, a perfect setup for that in a certain way where the the stuff that doesn't work and the battlegrounds that exist within us and between us are becoming so prominent and are basically becoming the center stage reality of how our societies are working, which is why I can completely understand anyone watching this saying like, okay, well, but what I see out actually in the world, Bruce and John, is I see a fundamental falling apart, or I see I'm not feeling hopeful right now. And I feel
Mm.
like, to me, I totally get that, and my sensing in my heart is that this is the prelude to the fracturing and the fissuring, and there's a calcification and a crystallization happening, which is making things brittle more and
And
more.
it's a base center activation, where the will to live and the fear of death is. And the response is fight. Like underneath a lot of the fight and blame and everybody taking sides is deep fear
Mm,
that things are falling apart, and who's doing something about it. And like, so fight, flee,
mm,
go into AI, create other realities, go to Mars, like somehow escape this whole fucking thing. The activation of the self-preservation instinct is so strong. So when we're in the middle of that, it's almost impossible to feel anything but,
mm.
because survival is being triggered.
Yeah, absolutely. And it we should make clear that what we're up to in our work and creations, what I'm up to with Singularity is not unmindful of that, but it's also not trying to immediately respond and participate in that process.
Yeah.
I feel like at the core of my life has been a deep question around, are we going to make it?
Mm.
We're going to make it through what feels like this obvious storm that has been building, and that I can only imagine what it's like for young people to just be born into, today. And at the same time, the deeper intuition of my heart has always been, I know we are. I know we are. And I can feel, and I'm here for the civilization that exists on the other side of this. And I trust the human beings who are where it's their dharma and it's their right place to be participating in the blood and the guts of the thing of the polarization now. And I know that what I'm here for is to contribute to setting up what is available after and what can actually support the transition, because it's plugged into real life and a life that can move through us and connect us and allow us to set up systems that are not about extraction and domination of the earth, but participation in its life. So singularity is based in that, you know.
Yeah, I've been tested on that lately because I don't feel like I'm attached to many things, except that I am a bit attached to that story you just said of like, well, my life's given to like creating spaces where the new civilization can flower. And when those places get attacked as if they're part of the old system, and projected on and all of those other things, there's a part of me that's like, but no, this is the new world. And then I realized, well, actually all forms could go. We don't know where the forms are. And what I've been tested in is to feel it actually doesn't matter whether the structures that we build to hold the future survive or not. What matters is the way that we hold them and how we respond when they come under pressure. And so whether temples fall or don't, what matters is the love and the core of us that is what we create temples from. And in the political area, it'll be the choice when push comes to shove, where our leadership rests back on the fundamental principles of life rather than moves into the easy, mainstream idea that we need to fight. And I feel like a lot of my work these days is to try to tie my hands to the mast when people try to enroll me in the next urgent, important battle that's holy for the sake of the world. So somehow resting in that eternal life that is beyond all comings and goings of forms feels like an important part of singularity. I'd love to discuss a little bit about how it's going to work, because I want to be involved and I want to help feel my way into how this thing's going to flower in the world.
Yeah. So I feel like we're in a movement building phase currently, right? So my work has been so far, I feel like the first year, we're in the second year now. The first year really felt like anchoring the core of what this is, having that really land in my core and in the core of some passionate, purposeful people, including yourself around me, where there's the of courseness of what this is. And I feel like what that has then moved into has been activating the culture of people who really deeply resonate with this in different nations, where we can start to build a movement. So I've been running events that have been about the activation of the soul of different nations to connect to people in multiple nations who feel the obviousness, the of courseness of what this is. And my vision is that as that work continues and as these cells and communities and waves of this movement build in different nations and more nations, in 2 years from now, let's say 3 years from now, maybe sooner, I imagine there's going to be warriors who start to emerge. There's going to be beings who are brave enough and courageous enough and vulnerable enough to say that they actually want to enter the political arena and represent this in the political process of their nations. And, the key piece here is, well, what they'd be representing is that one life that beats in the core of the earth and all humanity and all kingdoms of nature, and how that wants to be represented in the economic, the political, the social processes of their nation, rather than the kind of tribal, this is my kind of group of people that I'm representing against these people. So yeah, and so I feel that's where it is right now, and it's about stirring the participation, stirring the remembrance, stirring that forbidden longing in more and more human beings, and letting them know that this is a political movement, which is what basically their heart has been waiting for. And something that I'm excited about, Bruce, is just take a moment to think. about how many human beings there are on the planet that we know are in a process of soul awakening.
Mm-hmm.
It's vast.
Yes.
Vast. And think about how many of those human beings would say that they really legitimately feel like they have a political party that represents what they deeply care about.
Not a one.
Not a one, right? Because there just are not options for it. So I want to let those people know, I want to offer this as, okay, it's time. It's time to actually, build together a political movement that is in, the whole transnational political party thing. When I share that with people, a bunch of people are triggered because it's a party, and I get it. And that offers a fascinating opportunity. And that opportunity is we can have subdivisions of this one thing that lives and breathes the same dedication and the same sacred principles in multiple nations simultaneously. Yeah, and so letting people know that there is this opportunity. So yeah, we have different cells. There's about 7 different cells operating in 7 different nations. That I can feel that's going to be 10 to 12 over the next kind of month or two. And you and I want to start doing rallies. I'm running events here in Berlin, and I'm about to start traveling to different places to start running events. And yeah, so it's stirring the, okay, let's do this together.
A couple of things come up to me. First is part of the Aquarian age, or part of the move into collective power, feels to me a shift away from those millions, and I would count them in millions of people you're talking about, who actually have this at the core of their own being and are living it, but don't see it recognized in the world around them. And in the past would have taken the kind of Jesus thing of like, this is not my kingdom, this is not of this world. Like, you be busy doing whatever you're doing. I will just live, true to my own self. But now they're taking a collective responsibility, and a party like this allows them to say, actually, my world is this world. It's the only world that we have. And my responsibility as a cell that considers itself that it's had the privilege to wake up to this life principle, I have a responsibility to the collective, not like a weight on my shoulder, but as a joy in my heart that this is our world. And I'm not going to leave the political process and the economic process to people who are asleep and don't know who they are. I have a responsibility not just to the rest of humanity, but to the whales in the ocean and to what's left of the rainforest. And it's like, that responsibility rests in my heart, and I'm going to stand for it. And I don't want to have to stand alone. And there are a million other people standing with me. Yeah. So you restore the possibility of feeling power and not powerlessness in the world that we are. And the other thing that comes to mind is that whenever you have a party, just like whenever you have any form, like a religion, I remember reading there are 48,000 different sects in the Christian church now, so whenever you have, a channel of energy coming in and somebody standing for it or whatever, pretty soon you have multiple different versions of it, but those versions of it, dislocate from each other, and then wars are fought, and whether they're fought overtly in the public or whether they're fought behind the scenes, that sense of the universal principle that's enshrined at the center, that holds together, no matter, yes, diversity, yes, different wrappings in different nations, but the core principle is the thing that holds, because when that doesn't hold, then we just have business as usual. So that requires a level of dedication, not to a person or an ideology or whatever, but to the principle itself. And I feel like that's what's going to hold this together.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And I mean, I feel I really was touched by the point that you made around it would have been the way for so many people who are, and I've done this, you've done this, I'm sure, people on their soul journey and looking out on the world as it is and feeling, okay, well, my kingdom is not of this world. And, so I guess I'll commune inwardly and manage myself outwardly and, try and build the life that I can in the humble circumstances of my own life and so on. But, across this vast sea of awakening souls that I agree exists in millions, I would say, even if not hundreds of millions on the planet, we know what we're here for. We know what we're here for. And we know that we're here to anchor the kingdom on earth and to reveal the kingdom on earth, to reveal the kingdom that's always been here. We know that, And so this is the invitation. And I feel like I totally agree with you around the 48,000 chapters and like the fights and so on that can come with that. And I'm sure there'll be some of that. And I feel like also part of what I want to do with this is about the sacred vocation of representation and leadership, that this is going to be a massively decentralized process. And there's also necessary centralization in certain ways. And the centralization is for this sacred principle at the core, and also for a recognition that we're all just on a journey in our ability to have that move through us in a way that works. And leadership is that journey. Real leadership, leader, you and I both love the definition of leader, the scientific definition, which is a leader is a stream of plasma that channels lightning in a storm. Like leadership is an electrical reality, and that electrical reality is when we're in the flow of life. And yet, that life is just like, being a human being is being a meeting point for incredible forces and working ourselves out in the middle. And just like human beings learn over the course of our lives to be able to have love move through us in a way that is manageable, and still honest and open. And we learn over the course of our life to be in contact with this extraordinary force of eros that is just that's part of the world and life and the journey. And none of us are born knowing how to channel these extraordinary energies. We learn over time, and power is the same. This other frequency of this same life is the same. And that relates to the journey of leadership. There has to be really supportive, clear channels for the development of a totally different kind of leadership at the heart of this political process. Because, as I'm connected to a bunch of people who just do leadership work in the world, and it's a kind of known, absurd, frightening, painful reality that those people all know that there's only one real place in our society where the obvious necessity of deep leadership work has not yet landed. Only one, and that's, guess where, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so that's a whole piece, it's that I feel deeply we have to create cultures where the sacred vocation of holding and sharing power is recognized as something that calls us each and all deeper. And we must create cultures that support and honor what that means in a radically different kind of leadership, and that has checks and balances and accountability systems, and for how we can hold power deeply together. So I don't want to be part of another movement where there's polarized personalities arguing with polarized personalities about who's right in, and who's the one who's really holding the life,
So on that, I'd like to just talk about a big polarity that often comes up with power. And, I'm aware of the fact we're two white males talking about power and the restoration of the kingdom, and some link in the past with power has been very vision dominated. In other words, those that can climb the highest mountain and see the furthest wield the lightning bolt of inspiration. And the thing that grassroots people are afraid of is that kind of top down vision doesn't necessarily include them. And
Yeah.
so I want to talk about the balance between vision and vibration. So
Mm.
yes, the vision, the inspirational view from the heights, and yes, the vibration, which is that the power we're talking about is emerging up through the earth as well as descending down from cosmos. It's kundalini as well as vision. And so unless our bodies are vibrating with the truth of the power emerging up through the earth, as well as our hearts vibrating with the electrical leaders coming in from cosmos, we're in another polarity. So there are beings, and this is where I would say indigenous leaders are an important part of this process, that are tuned to the vibrational energy of power in the earth, as much as the visionary energy that's coming from cosmos, and making sure that polarity is unified in the field. I think that solves the issue of the people are rightly afraid of in terms of globalization, which is some United Nations people having a vision that they then want to blanket all over the world and standardize, or the grassroots people, we all just need to grow our potatoes in our own backyard and the world will come to rights. It's like, how do you deeply recognize that this impulse to pay attention to the details in your own body and in your own life and the global perspective are not two different worlds? They're actually part of the same world. And the vibration of those beings, of people resonant with life, is not going to be all people who buy into the same vision and consciousness, but they're people who are vibrating as well with the life energy that lives at the core.
Absolutely. Yeah. And where that goes for me, actually, in the deepest part of me, is opening to the earth as a being, and opening to the recognition that there's different groups of people who are being moved by its life in different ways. And those indigenous peoples who, in my view, are holding a point for the profound and sacred life and intelligence of the body of the earth. The living earth has a body that has this extraordinarily rich transmission of deep health and deep life and intelligence, that so much of the schism and the fracturing of our world is calling us to come back to. And there's the soul field of the earth, which is, vibrating through and activating the consciousness of more and more beings who are remembering that actually there's a field of love that we're invited to build from, and to, vision in, and to love each other in. And there's also, just like at the core of John, or at the core of Bruce, in addition, there's, in the core of my heart, there's a naked raw of life. The same is true of the earth that exists in the deep heart and core of the planet. There's a source of one life which is rising through the body and descending through the soul of the soul field of this planet, that actually, in my being, I sneakily suspect that something that may be coming in the midst of the disintegration and cracking collectively is, I think we may be on the verge of having some startling new level recognition that we are part of a being, and we are part of an extraordinary life. These aren't just kind of disconnected spiritual concepts around, that are bandied about on mountaintops by yogis and yoginis for millennia. Like, that actually we're on the verge of the radical, paradigm breaking recognition that we are living on and as extensions of a being that is the earth, of extraordinary intelligence and love and purpose. And yeah, so I find myself then wanting to tune into what are the frequencies of that life that the beings I'm coming into contact with are holding, and how can we together say yes to this life as the basis for a new way of doing things.
Yeah, I love that. And also because it begins to open up beyond even the diversity of human beings and all of their different ways of connecting with life. And in effect, the political party, the transnational political party, also has a seat for the mountains of Earth and for the forests and for the alien civilizations, and for, like, it's way beyond human. The life that's at the core is not just human life. It's not just the preservation of human life that matters and its survival in the form. It's the principle of life that lives at the core of all beings that sits at the core. So that adds a flavor and dimension of breaking us out of human centricity, which is what's required for the next step ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like that's something that's such a deep part of my longing with this. And I think it's a collective longing, it's like we so deeply long to drop the the adolescent game of positioning ourselves as the most advanced life forms on an inanimate planet. It's like there's such a longing, I feel, in so many people for us to just drop it, and in place of that, let's find our place. Let's take our rightful place, and take our rightful place in harmony with, in service to the Earth's community of kingdoms, and honor the responsibility, the unique responsibility that we hold because of the unique, beautiful thing that a human being is and that humanity is, which is different to the animal species and the forests and the mountains, but in a way where we honor the sacred life that exists through all of these life spheres, and I remember you saying to me a while ago, you were like, okay, and really the governance that's coming needs to have representatives of these different life spheres and kingdoms of the earth, sitting together. And it's been with me ever since, where I'm like, okay, we're gonna work out how we do this. Yeah, because it must be the whole, yeah, all the notes of the life of Earth are part of this. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, if the result in 10 years is there are now 5 competing transnational parties,
I think that might
and
happen.
that would be a great thing, because at
Yeah.
least the conversation has opened up about the possibility of that.
Yeah.
So one of the things you're doing is you're opening a door that is self-evident, but once that opens, then it's going to get the inquiry of the human heart and soul into what really matters, and what really matters to us as a collective. And I remember when I'm looking back at that 5 years ago, that place that stirred me was where I was sharing, look, I really want to get beyond this. So it seems huge, like, to create a cohesive, functioning humanity that's not at war with each other and not eating the planet, and that, like, is healthy and understands who it is and what it's for. Like, that seems huge and idealistic to people, but, like, there's a part of me that wants to go beyond that, in the same way that in a personal, after transformation is open, like, well, okay, now that I've got all of my bits together, what am I for? And I long for the movement into Earth and humanity, like you say, to give off their adolescent game, to be put in their place, and then discover that that place has cosmic repercussions.
Mm.
That it rather than sending off spaceships, that human consciousness is not just earthbound. It's
Mm.
part of a vast sphere of consciousness, and there's a role for humanity when it's integrated its
Mm.
relationship with the biosphere. There's a cosmic destiny awaiting for it that is so amazing. The glimpses that we can see, you know, open up a world that takes everybody's focus off the little, the little problems that they're experiencing in their emotional body, and replaces it with something amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about not just the possibility of creating a political structure that helps humanity discover who it is, but then what,
Yeah,
then
absolutely. And on a certain level, we've had this conversation with the recognition that, in one way, this is a big deal, what we're talking about. It's a big deal,
yeah.
right? And at the same time, when you open up that kind of perspective, this is really a very small thing, and it's something actually you've been with me in my inner worlds recently. It's not something I've spoken to you about, but I've been in a whole thing around how just the impact that the scale of the cosmology that we're starting to open up now, of our sense of the universe that we're a part of, the psychoactive nature of that. And it's, quite apart from, it feels like, with the American government releasing every few months another drip, drip, drip feeds of the obvious disclosure that actually there's all sorts of beings that have been visiting Earth for, quite a while, and we are clearly not alone. You and I in our work, we've often talked about the significance of the recognition that a black hole is a whole other conversation we could open up, but and I will jump off in a minute because I've got to go and be a father to my child, but just with this, the significance of the discovery of black holes at the center of galaxies opens up a whole new scale of cosmology. And what I've really been with recently is the impact, the psychoactive impact of the plus scale cosmology beyond that, even, because actually yes, there's a black hole at the center of every galaxy, but there's something like, whatever it is, two is it billion to trillion? I don't know. It's like some unimaginably large.
There's a lot, John.
Right. There's a lot of galaxies, in the universe, and the way that they make up clusters and superclusters and great walls together, the bodies and filaments throughout. It's just beginning to start to locate ourselves. Just if you can pierce through the noise of like what's going on in the world, to start to relocate ourselves, not even just as cells of a living Earth, but as a planet within a universe that most of which is uncharted, and yet we know there's this unimaginable scale of creation that is humming, in ways that entail mysteries we haven't even begun. It's the psychoactive nature of that is just extraordinary.
Yeah. And hopefully in 5 years, we'll look back to this end of this conversation and we'll have much more energy for the cosmic dimension where we're going.
Yeah.
What I love about you as an integrated human being, and also the integration of the polarities of life, is that one minute we could be talking about the mind-blowing psychoactive power of realizing the universe as this being,
Yeah.
and talking about alien civilizations and global political parties, and then you're going to be clicking the switch, gathering Leander onto your lap, holding him in your arms, and shifting your consciousness to playing with trains or whatever is going on in his world right now. And that's a seamless whole. It's one reality, and the capacity to shift awareness to where the heart needs it to be. So that's a treasure to share with you, and the heights and the depths.
Yeah, for me too. Thank you, brother. And thank you for the ways that you've reminded me, like what I find so sacred is to look into his eyes and to see this life and to see how it's rising through the beauty of his soul, which shines so clearly, and the beauty of his growing body that's unfolding itself with all of his likes and loves. And yeah, so yeah, it is a deep, it's an unspeakable, heart broken open privilege for me to feel everything that we have spoken about in the eyes and the heart and the body of my son, and that, and really the everything that we're speaking about is a profound thing. I don't take it lightly of just like, oh, we'll just switch it around and everything will work itself out. We're on a certain level, I feel like there's huge changes which are coming imminently, and we're talking about a radical relocation of how to be a human being, and that relates to how we have children, and it relates to how we raise our children, how we look into their eyes and how we see who they are, and how we share what I am and what you are and what this is. And yeah, so
Well, thank you for stretching yourself so deeply between your personal and the universal.
thank you, brother. Thank you for this time. Always a pleasure, and let's do it again in 5 years.
Or not, or before. All right.
Okay.
See you.
Yeah.